Hello and welcome to the Discover Reading podcast.
On this episode, we'll be talking about the fantastic support services available at Reading that are there for our students to help them overcome any challenges they meet and to ensure that they get the most out of their courses. This is an area that often gets forgotten about when people are focusing on what courses they want to apply for, but actually having a really strong support network available to you at university is absolutely key to ensuring you can perform at your best throughout your studies.
Exactly. And we are very lucky to be joined by two of our current students, Kelly and Lottie, who will be sharing their own experiences and discussing the type of support that is available at Reading. So, welcome to both of you. Please do introduce yourselves.
Thanks, Chris and Phil. Hi, my name's Kelly and I study MSc Language Sciences here at the University of Reading, and that's in the School of Psychology and Clinical Language Sciences.
Hi everyone, I'm Lottie and I'm studying for a Masters in History at Reading, and that's in the Department of Humanities.
Great, thank you both for joining us. Now, before we get on to talking about the more specific support services at Reading, we thought it would be really helpful to speak more broadly about the sense of community here. So Lottie, you're now studying a Masters with us and you also studied your degree at Reading. What kind of support have you found during your time at Reading from both your fellow students and also staff in your department?
One of the reasons I actually chose to stay at Reading was the really strong sense of community that the department had to offer. It's particularly true in the Masters course. So we have weekly lunch meetings and monthly virtual writing retreats. So we have so many opportunities to discuss and collaborate on our work, as well as a chance to have like a little catch up and offer some moral support to one another. Having a sense of community is so, like, I can't even overstate this, it's so essential to postgraduate study, especially when you're in deadline season, like the night before, like the big submission, messaging one of your friends. It makes such a difference to know that you're not alone in it. And I think that's one of the real strongest points of this course. Because of its emphasis on support, I've also had a really great relationship with my personal academic tutor. This is both in my undergrad and in my Masters. It's just really nice to have like that certain person that you know you can always go to if you've got a problem.
That's fantastic. And Kelly, you were new to Reading when you started your Masters. How was it beginning postgraduate study at somewhere completely new?
So to begin with, I was actually quite worried about like starting again in a new place, because obviously I did my undergrad at a different university, but I've had so much support from not only my course mates and from the staff. So one of the things I wanted to do from like the very get-go was I wanted to like make friends and connect with the people at my course. So we had a few introductory meetings with the program director and with our shared personal tutor. And we all agreed to swap our contact numbers, and that was right at the beginning of autumn term. And so we made a WhatsApp group, and that was so good for us because not only could we get to know each other, but most of us had never been to Reading before. Some of us are international students. And so some of them hadn't even really been to the UK before. So most of us were all in completely like the same boat, just slightly different circumstances. So because, you know, we didn't really have anyone else to lean on, we lent on each other and we bonded really quickly. We keep in regular contact now. We check in on each other, especially with like exam seasons coming up, as well as like having that great support network from the other students. Like the staff have been really welcoming, and like I also really want to shout out my academic tutor because they've been so good. They've held frequent meetings with me and the rest of my course mates on like one-to-one basis, and then also we've had group meetings as well where we've all like kind of bounced off each other and like sort of talked about our experiences.
Lovely stuff. And just thinking about the academic support structures that are in place for Reading students, could you talk a bit about the support centres, Kelly?
Yeah, for sure. So the support centres are actually available for sort of any kind of queries you might have. They give you help and advice while you're at uni. The people that work in those centres are called the student support coordinators, and they're kind of tasked with advising you, helping you, or perhaps signposting you to other departments or other staff members who can advise you with any of your issues, whether they're academic, study related, assessment related, or perhaps like personal issues, maybe to do with finance, perhaps. So there are actually several support centres across both of our campuses, and each of them hosts the student support coordinators for various schools. And each school has at least one coordinator, so that I know that mine personally has two. They have been really helpful when I've had to go to them for any help, especially when I've had to get advice and help with extensions I've had to apply for my coursework. They've always communicated things really well, explained things really well, and they've also been really kind and supportive when they've written to me.
Fantastic. All very useful information. And in terms of other academic support, could you tell us a bit about what the university library offers students?
So the library is also really, really helpful. So they have an entire section of their website for study advice. So on here, you can book one-to-one advice. And I actually have a session coming up next week because I want a few tips towards writing a very specific type of essay. But also there's just guides that you can read through, and you can also book onto webinars that they host. So I've used a lot of the guides. For example, when I first started back at Reading, I used the essay writing help guide as I wanted a refresher in that. I personally took 2 years out between my undergraduate course and starting my master's. So I hadn't written an essay in about 2 years. So I really wanted to sort of remind myself about structure and, how to get all your points in. And that guide really helped me. I've also been using their systematic review guide, as this is really important for my clinical placement that I'm on at the moment. So both of these have been so useful to me throughout my year, and I've aimed to kind of replicate all the knowledge I've learned so far in what I'm doing now.
That's fantastic. So basically, in terms of kind of academic support, you've got your course mates, your academic tutor, the support centres, and also study skills sessions offered by the library. So there's always someone to talk to about your studies and completing your assignments. Now, moving on to some of our other student services teams, one of the most important ones is our fantastic careers team. And they're there for you throughout your time at Reading and even after you've graduated as well. So the types of support they offer are one-to-one careers appointments to discuss your job options, CV, cover letter and job application guidance and feedback, and also LinkedIn profile advice, as well as giving you preparation tips for assessment centres and obviously preparation tips for interviews as well. And so the careers team also run kind of training and information sessions around all of those things as well. And I know, Lottie, you've made use of some of those in the form of webinars most recently. Could you talk us through what those were like?
It'd be my pleasure. I absolutely love the webinars. Two of my favourite ones I've attended most recently were Interview Skills for the Nervous and Finding Graduate Jobs in the Pandemic. I really wanted to focus on improving my CV and interview techniques, just whilst I still have the support at Reading. I know you still have it after you graduate, but I've got that kind of anxiety feeling of what's going to come next, I think lockdown's really made it quite hard on everyone. So I just wanted to kind of improve that. And I was especially worried about a lot of recruitment having moved and interviewing having moved online. So Interview Skills for the Nervous. I absolutely hate interviews. I never feel prepared enough, even if I do hours and hours and hours of work and research, and I always seem to get really overwhelmed by it. So I was nervous for this webinar because I was worried it would be the same sort of advice that people with anxiety tend to get of, just take a deep breath and all that, but it actually was nothing of the sort. It was actually so helpful and gave a lot of really useful practical advice, and also in a very non-judgmental way, which is quite rare, unfortunately, for a lot of things targeted towards people with anxiety. That some of the advice they offered was centered around preparation for interview, so how you can do that in a structured way without sort of trying to memorize the company's history entirely, which unfortunately has been one of my moves in my quest to get employed. So one of the best bits of advice they gave is that the more prepared you are in a structured way, the less likely of a negative outcome of the interview will occur. So essentially, do the work and do it in such a way that you can't really go wrong. I know that sounds ridiculous, but like it kind of like the way that they said it and the way that they explained it and they showed us how to do it, it made so much sense. And it was so like knowing how to go about it made it so much more manageable and so much less overwhelming. And it was just really like, it's exactly what I needed to hear. So I really enjoyed those webinars. They were absolutely amazing. Just what I needed for, during my anxious period about my jobs.
Perfect. Yeah, that all sounds excellent to me. And I also think, understandably, a lot of students currently have concerns about the state of the job market at the moment. Has that been a major factor to you in attending the webinars and looking for career support?
Yeah, I think so. I think with the pandemic, you're obviously stuck at home. I think it's really easy to let your worries get carried away. Like, hence me, I'm not anywhere near finishing my master's and I'm really worried about finding a job. Just the sheer lack of having anything else to think about apart from my degree and what I'm going to do next. But having the careers service moving these to webinars rather than in-person events meant that when you arguably most needed this support, it was available to you and this expertise was available to you, which I think was a real credit where it's due to the careers team, because that was absolutely amazing.
That's fantastic, and yeah, definitely an area which I think the pandemic has kind of brought into focus for everyone is the importance of looking after your mental health. I mean, you kind of mentioned sort of the anxiety around interviews and things like that, but yeah, just kind of recognizing that how important mental health is and how important it is as part of your physical well-being. And I think that people kind of agree that we all have a responsibility to ensure that we speak quite candidly and practically as possible about mental health, to ensure that people feel confident to ask for help when they need it, and also so that they know where to go for that help. So recently, Kelly, you wrote a really excellent blog for us about the university's student support services, and I thought your section on the available mental health support was really super comprehensive and helpful. Could you talk us through kind of the main services which are available here at Reading in terms of mental health support?
Yeah, so firstly, thanks for, thinking it was great. That means a lot. But yeah, so while I've been here at the Uni of Reading, I've actually accessed so many of the support services for my mental health. So I've personally always struggled with anxiety and depression, and just stress as well, a lot of. But I think, as we've said, like, the pandemic hasn't helped that as well. And, it's such a stressful time at the moment with everything that's been going on. And I've, really needed like a lot of extra support. And that has been so easily available to me, which meant like so much. So the three sort of teams I've really been in contact with are the student welfare team, the counselling and wellbeing team, and the disability advisory service. So the welfare team are kind of aimed at helping with more personal issues or difficulties. So I was struggling to kind of cope with my master's degree, and it got really difficult at one point around October, November. I contacted my academic tutor and he immediately put me in contact with the welfare team, and they arranged to call me so quickly. The welfare officer was she was wonderful. She was calming. She was reassuring. She really sort of brought my mood down to, I kind of became very zen when I talked to her. She gave me some sort of stress management tips, but then she also signposted me sort of to where else to get help as well. And that's kind of how I discovered the other services too. So the second service I used were the counselling and wellbeing team. I'm still in contact with them now, actually, and they help students to kind of manage various issues via one-to-one support, like skills, guidance support, and more. So the sort of main services they offer are sort of like mental health advice and tips, or actual counselling. All the staff members that work in the team have various backgrounds and various skills to help support all students and their needs. So they could help with specific mental health conditions, or just, general, I'm struggling at uni, the pandemic's really affecting me, kind of more sort of basic things. Or if they can't always help, they can at least, again, signpost students towards other services, for example, NHS help, or, you know, recommending you go speak to your GP. So they at least, you know, will always be able to guide you towards some sort of future solution. And finally, the last service that I use, again, still, is actually the Disability Advisory Service. So they offer help, support and guidance to any students who have a registered disability, mental health condition, or specific learning difficulty. So many students actually register with the service before or upon arriving at Reading, so you can register as an applicant. However, you can still register with the service once you start at Reading, especially if perhaps you've received a diagnosis of something like halfway through the term that you didn't know you had before. So for example, my housemate's just been diagnosed with dyslexia halfway through the year. So she's registered with Disability Advice Service now, and she's getting a lot more help and support. So the main kind of role that they have is assessing the impact that your disability or mental health condition or learning difficulty has on you, and then how they can best help you. So whether that's with general study help, coursework, or maybe exam adjustments. So for example, I have in the past suffered with anxiety attacks if things get very overwhelming. So I get a bit of extra time in exams if I need to take some time away to have a breather, relax, calm down if I can feel myself getting a bit worked up. So that's something that they provided for me, which has been really reassuring, because it just gives me that little bit of leeway. If I need to go and make a drink, if I need to, you know, for example, in a exam in person, I could leave the room for a few minutes and then I could come back and sit down and carry on. So yeah, it's been it's been so like helpful that so far. Those are sort of the 3 services I've used. They've really helped me, and I would highly recommend them to, you know, anyone who might need sort of any mental health advice, whether it's the beginning of the year, the end of the year, whether it's halfway through your degree, at any point. Like, they are so useful.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. That's just a really clear explanation of how the mental health support teams work here at Reading. So that's fantastic. And just picking up on your mention of the Disability Advice Service, Lottie, I know that you've had experience of using that service at Reading. Could you talk us through that, please?
Yeah, sure. So like Kelly, I have the fun duo of anxiety and depression, and I also have a physical health condition, which is considered a disability. So having this fun trio of conditions means that studying gets very complicated very quickly, with all of these appointments and all of these special conditions that you need to have to be able to do what other people can do normally. Thankfully, Reading's Disability Service has taken so much of this pressure off of me. They've been so supportive and also really efficient at implementing the adjustments that I've needed for my coursework. And they've been super empathetic to the difficulties faced by disabled students. To be honest, having the support behind you, like, so you can focus on your studies, it's just such a weight off your shoulders. It's horrible, the thought of having to arrange all these things yourself, like the adjustments or rearrangements. Just it's just not what you need when you're doing a master's. So having that support behind you is amazing. Yeah, just thinking about it, I think it's important to be really candid and to share experiences with mental health, because doing a master's is quite a stressful experience, and when you already have conditions, it can get complicated. Because of the pandemic, I had to take some time off, and the disability support team were absolutely amazing. So they helped me to sort out my deadline extensions, and they also signposted me to some further help and resources and set me up with the counselling team. Also, after that, when I managed to come back to my studies, they reached out to me really regularly to check up that I was okay, which made such a big difference. It's so nice to like not feel like you have to go through it all on your own. I think Reading does that so well. They're so clued up about mental health, which I think is really important, especially in this current climate with everything being a little bit intense, you know. But yeah, I'm so grateful to have all that support, and yeah, Reading does it best.
That's brilliant and really, really good to hear. And yeah, thank you, Lottie and Kelly, for talking us through your experiences of using those services.
I could not agree more. And thank you guys for speaking so well and candidly about this most difficult of issues. Great. So we've covered a lot in this episode, but there is still lots of excellent support services that we haven't even mentioned yet. Some of the key ones are our brilliant student financial support team, as well as lots of support and guidance for international students. I should also mention religious students, and also medical and general health advice, as well as a dedicated University of Reading medical practice opposite the campus as well. And in order to make this episode as useful as possible, we'll be adding links to everything we have spoken about and other areas we haven't had the time to mention in the description of this episode. If you have any questions arising from this episode, please do refer to that information, and don't be afraid whatsoever of getting in touch with the relevant team to ask for more information. So finally, I just want to say a massive thank you to you, Lottie, and to you, Kelly, for sharing your experiences, and thank you to everyone for listening.